You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the results of UFC Fight Night, Jacare versus Blachowicz, with Jacare's move up to the light heavyweight division, as well as breaking down the top 15 lightweights in the world in the lightweight division and forecasting their next fights throughout 2020 and 2021. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I hope you're ready for this episode of the podcast because I sure am. Last week we started a little bit of a new concept. I wouldn't say new concept, so to speak, because we always talk about what fights I think should be next, who should fight who, and where people should go from where they're at. But last week we broke down the top 15 ranked fighters in the welterweight division and who they should be fighting next based on the fights that were already scheduled, like Covington versus Usman and some other fights that are already booked. I thought that Ponzinibbio and Robbie Lawler were booked, but apparently that didn't happen. And, it was booked at one point and it's no longer happening. So we had to go through that and I really enjoyed it. That's actually up on YouTube. Just search up Touch 'em Up Pod, TOUCH_EMUP !pod POD on YouTube, and you can find some of my earlier episodes. I uploaded some of my Double Trouble breakdowns that I did, including the ones that are up right now are Dustin Poirier, Kelvin Kattar, Jorge Masvidal, Alexander Volkanovski, and Israel Adesanya. The Dominic Cruz and Rose Namajunas ones should be going up soon. I'll have those up probably by the end of the week, if not earlier. But on this episode, like I said, we're going to break down the results of the UFC Fight Night. I didn't watch it. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But I saw the results of who won, and apparently I didn't miss much because a lot of people said that the event was pretty much a shit show all the way around, and nothing super exciting happened. It was pretty lackluster for a fight night card, which it kind of looked like it would be, but there were some sleepers on the card that I thought would be good. And and then we have a couple fight announcements. First things first, Ben Askren announced his retirement from the MMA, from the UFC, says he needs hip replacement surgery. He did this on the Ariel Helwani MMA show. And, to be honest, it sucks for him. You go into the UFC previously undefeated from a different organization, and you get your first fight against Robbie Lawler. You win controversially. Did Robbie really go out or not at UFC 235? And prior to that, you got basically angle slammed and got your face pounded into the canvas, but you came back and got the win via referee stoppage, via the choke. And then you go and you fight Jorge Masvidal and you get knocked out in 5 seconds, the fastest knockout in UFC history. Then you get a fight against Damian Maia, which is in your realm. It's grappler versus grappler, and you're doing pretty well, and then you get submitted, which it's not a problem to be submitted by Damian Maia. Usually if he beats people, it's because he submitted them. And a lot of guys have fallen to Damian Maia's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game. He's probably the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist in the UFC. And I don't really think you can argue that. Probably the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist in all of mixed martial arts. I would venture to say most likely, especially after the submission of Ben Askren, who most people thought were one of the best grapplers in MMA, and he out-grappled him and was able to take his back and submit him with the rear naked choke. But, I'm happy for Askren. He did what he said he was going to do. Obviously the plan didn't go like he thought it was going to. But he came into the UFC and he put himself on the line, and moved forward and tried to take the toughest fights possible. Robbie Lawler for your first fight in the UFC that's a tough matchup for anybody. And to take that in your first fight in the UFC was a big step. Then Jorge Masvidal, then Damian Maia. So good for Ben Askren, and congratulations on a good career. You've only suffered 2 losses. I think he was 19-2. And so, it is what it is. It's kind of sad to see him go out like this, but he did what he said he was going to do. And he said he wasn't planning on being in the UFC that long anyway. He was going to stick it out he said his plan was to beat Lawler, beat Masvidal, then beat Usman, and then retire. So, you got one of the 3 and, the other 2 didn't happen, but hey, it is what it is. But that was one of the biggest news coming out of today. Another one is the UFC announced a It said it's in the works for February 8th, UFC Fight Night. Derek the Black Beast Lewis is expected to fight Alir Latifi, welcoming Alir Latifi up to the heavyweight division from the light heavyweight division on February 8th. And this is a good fight. Good fight for Derek Lewis. If he wins this, a win over Blachowicz and a win over Alir Latifi. Those are two good wins. Obviously, Latifi coming up from light heavyweight to heavyweight is a little, it's a little bit of an asterisk next to the win if he's able to finish him, but it's a good thing. And I think if Black Beast wins this fight, if Derek Lewis is able to pull it off, it's really good for him. And if Latifi's able to pull it off, he shoots himself right up to the top of that heavyweight division. I think Lewis is ranked probably like 5 or 6 in the heavyweight division, something like that. I know he's up there in the rankings. So, good for him. And I can't wait to see what happens next. Obviously, this is a good fight. Nothing else is announced for the February 8th card, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. I know there's some fights announced for January. I heard something like Macy Barber and Roxanne Modafferi were going to fight at UFC 246. That's a decent fight. That's a really good fight for Macy Barber. I know they have a lot of plans for her, and she's a huge star in the UFC's flyweight. I think she's a flyweight, 125 pounds. Yeah, a huge star in the UFC flyweight division, and a win over a veteran like Roxanne Modafferi. They're kind of feeding Roxanne to the wolves, but she's been there, done that, veteran of women's MMA, one of the pioneers. And for Macy Barber to get a win over her, it's going to just up her name value and push her up the rankings. And I expect her to get the win in that fight for sure. What else was announced? One more thing big in terms of announcements is that the UFC is going to go back to Auckland, New Zealand on, I believe it's February 23rd. Yeah, on Sunday, February 23rd, UFC Fight Night in Auckland, New Zealand. There's only one guy who's going to main event this card, and it's going to be Dan the Hangman Hooker, obviously coming off a huge win at UFC 243 over the number 6th ranked contender, Raging Ally Quinta, and he's expecting a huge fight from then on. And I would expect him to get a good name, someone in the top 5 for sure, and it'll be a 5-round main event. And I can't wait to see it. I'm excited. I think they should get Brad Riddell on this card as well. He had a good showing at UFC 243 against Jamie Malarkey. I'm pretty sure they won fight of the night. It was a back and forth 3-round war, but Riddell showed off his great striking that he learned. And he's obviously the striking coach at City Kickboxing. And just really, really a good guy and a good fighter for I believe he's 145 pounds. Is he in the featherweight division? If not, he's at 155 pounds. But I would expect to see Brad Riddell get on this card as well on February 23rd. And we're actually going to talk about Dan the Hangman Hooker's next fight, but we're going to do it further on down the line in the episode, because we're going to do like we did last week with the UFC ranking top 15 ranked at welterweight and who I believe they should fight next. Now we're going to move on to the 155-pound division and forecast who the top 15 guys should fight, why I think it's a good matchup, who I would probably favor in the matchup if it were to happen, and why you would book it the way that you did. This is just another fun concept I've decided for the podcast. You have to adapt and change over time and still keep your same roots. So this is just another segment we're going to add on to the podcast, and it'll be fun to go down the weight classes. I expect to do one at heavyweight, light heavyweight, welterweight. We already did. We're doing lightweight now. We got to do the middleweights, featherweights, bantamweights, strawweights, everybody. I expect to break down every division. I think it's fun. I think it'll really get your minds rolling on who you would want to see fight and which fights are booked currently and stuff like that. But yeah, guys, obviously, like I said, the fight night from the past weekend, it wasn't anything super crazy or super, insane to write home about. Jacare lost to Blachowicz via split decision. I didn't watch it, like I said, but I heard that a lot of people thought that Jacare could have won the fight. Not that he did anything, crazy to win the fight, but Blachowicz didn't really do much of anything. And they said that Jacare was just a little bit more active and he probably could have got the nod. Getting a split decision over like the top 2 or 3 ranked guys in the light heavyweight division for Jacare, he had a better fare than Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. So good on Jacare for not getting starched in his light heavyweight debut. I expect him to get another fight at light heavyweight. I think he said he was probably going to stay in the division, and he wasn't like discouraged or anything that he lost. obviously disappointed, but he didn't feel like he had to move back down to middleweight. So I would expect him to get another good fight at light heavyweight. Maybe Jacare versus a guy like, I don't know. Maybe the winner of Paul Craig. No, you got to give him a higher ranked guy than that. Who's ranked in the light heavyweight division currently? Let's check, and I could just come up with a quick thing for who I think he should fight. Let's see. We're just gonna go to the rankings page. Sorry, guys, I should have had this up, but we don't. So just bear with me. So Blachowicz was ranked number 6 in the division. Jacare lost. So maybe give Jacare a guy like Volkan Oezdemir or Glover Teixeira. Actually, no, you know what? Give Jacare the winner of... You know what? No, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and let's say since Alir Latifi's going up to heavyweight, let's give Johnny Walker Jacare Souza if he decides to stay at light heavyweight. Both guys coming off defeats. Obviously, Walker's probably going to take a long time off just because of the knockout loss he suffered, even though it was basically like a TKO. But I'd say let's do Jacare versus Johnny Walker in 2020. That's a good fight for light heavyweight. If Johnny Walker beats Jacare Souza, it's good on his name. And if Jacare beats Johnny Walker, it's good on him too, because this was, the UFC's, rising star in the light heavyweight division. Corey Anderson put that to bed for a little bit. And if Jacare gets the win here, it just ups his stock and ups his status. So it's good on him. Now let's move to the, obviously the co-main event. It was Paul Craig versus Shogun Rua. They fought to a split draw, and both of them want to get a rematch immediately. I expect the fight to probably be rebooked early, maybe January 2020. I'd say January 2020 they'll rebook Paul Craig and Shogun Rua for a fight night or like a prelims down the line. But yeah, split draw, and at least, neither of them suffered the loss. I heard it was a good fight, and then in the first round, and then just kind of slowed down. Charles Oliveira knocks out Jared Gordon in the first round. Former, obviously, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who would always get all of his wins based on his grappling, choking people out, getting guillotines, rear naked chokes, arm bars, triangles, stuff like that. And now he's becoming a knockout artist. I'm pretty sure his last 2 wins he has via knockout, and he did it again here, first round knockout over Jared Flash Gordon. And Oliveira is looking at a good fight. I think in his next fight he should get probably a top 10 ranked opponent. I don't know who it would be, but maybe we'll break it down because he's in the lightweight division, and we'll cover that in the rankings breakdown. James Krause knocked out Sergio Moraes in the 3rd round. Picture perfect right hand as Sergio Moraes was trying to slip and evade the shot. And good win for James Krause. I expected him to win. I don't know if I expected him to get a knockout like this, but I did expect James Krause to get the victory here, and I'm excited. Like I said, I enjoyed him on the Ultimate Fighter when he was on that season. And I hope big things for him in the future, and I hope he gets in a good fight. I could possibly see him fighting Anthony Rocco Martin, but who knows? We'll see what happens down the line. Francisco Trinaldo beat Bobby Green via decision. Doesn't surprise me. Bobby Green's been pretty hot, pretty cold since he came into the UFC. A lot of losses. I don't really know who he's beaten in the UFC. Actually, I know he had that draw with Lando Veneta, but I'm pretty sure he hasn't gotten many wins in the UFC besides that draw, even though that's not technically a win. But yeah, Trinaldo's been a pretty good guy ever since he showed up in the UFC. He was on a streak for a while, then he lost, then he came back a little bit, lost again, but he got it back on track here with the win over Bobby Green. Randy Brown beat Warley Alves. This actually really surprised me. I expected it to be a good fight, but I thought Warley Alves was going to be able to just dictate the pace and finish Randy Brown, but he actually ended up getting finished himself. Randy Brown won via 2nd round submission. Good win for him. He's got a win over Mickey Gall, a win over Warley Alves, lost to Nico Price via those crazy hammer fists from the bottom when Randy Brown was on top. But, I expect a good fight for him too, and this is just another bright star in the welterweight division. And then Douglas Silva de Andrade defeated Renan Barão via decision. Doesn't surprise me at all. Renan Barão's been pretty hot and cold. He probably had to get this win, but I expect him to get cut from the UFC. I know he hasn't been cut yet, but this is probably time to let him go. He's lost, 6 or 7 fights in a row. I think he's like 1-7 in his last 8. And yeah, it's just time to go, man. You got to move on. But yeah, I think we're going to cut the first part off here. And then in the second part, we're going to break down the top 15 at lightweight and who I feel should fight next. Yeah, that's going to be it for part 1 of this episode, guys. Stay tuned.